My father canceled my 18th birthday for my spoiled brother, but when my grandfather discovered the truth about why he ignored me, he changed his $1 million will and left him nothing while I graduate with honors. I'm 22 years old, about to graduate from college, and there's a reason why my father and younger brother aren't going to be at the ceremony, even though technically they're both alive and in perfect health. The thing is, I haven't spoken to them in almost 4 years. Since I turned 18, and I know that sounds dramatic, but trust me, there's a whole story behind all of this. I guess I should start at the beginning, from when my mom died of lung cancer when I was 16, because that's when everything started to get really bad. Although looking back, I think the signs were always there, and I just didn't want to see them. My mom, Stephanie, was basically my favorite person in the world. You know, that special connection you sometimes have with one parent more than the other. I could talk to her about everything. She understood me, and when she died, I felt like half my soul had been ripped out. My dad, Victor, was never exactly the warm and affectionate type of father, at least not with me, but I thought it was just his way of being, like the classic stoic dad who doesn't know how to express emotions. What I didn't know at that time was that there was a very specific reason for his coldness toward me, but we'll get to that later. My younger brother, Hunter, was like 13 when Mom died, and he'd always been Dad's favorite. It was obvious to anyone who saw it, but I thought it was because he was the youngest. You know what I mean? Like, the baby of the family always gets more attention. It's normal. Or that's what I told myself. After Mom died, the dynamic in the house changed completely. And when I say completely, I mean it became almost uninhabitable for me. My dad focused even more on Hunter. Like I didn't even exist most of the time. And Hunter became increasingly spoiled and bratty because Dad basically gave him everything he asked for without any consequences for his behavior. I tried to keep myself busy with school, had good grades, was in debate club, did everything you're supposed to do to be a good son, but it was never enough to receive even a little bit of attention or recognition from my dad. Hunter, on the other hand, was pretty mediocre in school, spent most of his free time playing video games or hanging out with his friends, and yet my dad acted like he was the most incredible kid in the world. It was frustrating, honestly, but I kept telling myself things would get better, that maybe my dad was dealing with his own grief in his own way, and eventually things would go back to normal, whatever that meant. Fast forward to when I was about to turn 18. In my senior year of high school, I'd already been accepted to a pretty good university about 3 hours away, had plans to study engineering, and I was excited to finally get out of that house and start my own life. My birthday fell on a Saturday, and since it was my 18th birthday, like an important birthday, I figured we'd do something special. I wasn't expecting a huge party or anything like that, but I thought at least we'd have a family dinner or something. My dad had told me a few weeks before to plan something, so I had invited some close friends over for a small gathering at the house. Nothing crazy, just pizza and video games, basically. Everything was confirmed. I'd bought some snacks with my own money from the part-time job I had at an electronics store, and I was genuinely excited for the first time in a long time. But then, like a week before my birthday, Hunter had some kind of crisis because he didn't make his school's football team. You have to understand that Hunter had always been pretty athletic but not exceptionally talented, and that year there were like 40 kids competing for 30 spots on the team. So it wasn't exactly surprising that he didn't make it, but he took it like it was the end of the world. He came home crying, saying his life was ruined and all his friends were on the team and he was going to be left alone. You know, typical 5-year-old drama. My dad, instead of telling him it was just part of life and that he'd have other opportunities, decided he needed to do something special to cheer Hunter up, and that something special turned out to be a weekend fishing trip to a lake like 5 hours away, a place Hunter had always wanted to go. The problem was that weekend was my birthday. My dad told me on a Tuesday night, like casually, as if it wasn't a big deal. I remember I was eating dinner, I think it was spaghetti or something, and he just said, "Hey Adrian, we're going to have to cancel your birthday thing this weekend. I'm taking Hunter to the lake because he really needs this right now." I sat there with my fork in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. I told him, "But Dad, I already invited my friends. Everything's already planned. It's my 18th birthday." And he just shrugged and said, "You can do something with your friends another day. This is important for your brother." He needs to know. I support to him. I tried to explain that it was important to me too, that it was a significant birthday. But he stood firm, and when I tried to insist, he basically threatened me, saying that if I didn't stop being selfish and understand that family comes first, maybe he'd reconsider helping me with college expenses. That left me speechless. Literally. I couldn't believe he was using my education money as blackmail to get me to accept him ruining my birthday. But what could I do? I didn't have enough savings to pay for college on my own. I needed that financial help, so I basically swallowed my anger and said it was fine. I had to call all my friends and cancel the plans, making up some excuse about a family emergency or something. I don't remember exactly what I told them because I was too humiliated to be honest about what was really happening. My friends were understanding, told me it was no problem, that we'd do it another day, but I knew it wouldn't be the same. You know, the moment had passed. Friday night, the day before my birthday, my dad and Hunter left for the lake. Hunter didn't even say goodbye to me. He was too excited packing his fishing stuff and talking non-stop about all the fish he was going to catch. My dad left me some money on the kitchen table, like $40, I think, and a note that said something like, "Order pizza for your birthday. Congratulations." Like the absolute minimum effort. I watched them leave from my bedroom window, my dad's truck driving away down the street, and I felt this weird mix of anger, sadness, and this empty feeling that's hard to describe. I spent the whole Friday night alone in the house, trying to distract myself with video games and YouTube, but I couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it all was. Saturday, my actual birthday, I woke up like at 10 inches the morning. There was no happy birthday message from my dad or Hunter. Nothing. I checked my phone and had some messages from friends and from my maternal grandfather, Eugene, wishing me happy birthday, which was nice, but the absence of anything from my own immediate family hurt more than I want to admit. I stayed in my pajamas all day, literally didn't do anything productive, just laid on the couch watching random movies on Netflix and feeling miserable. I ordered pizza with the money my dad had left me, but I wasn't hungry, so I only ate like 2 slices and the rest just sat in the box on the table. At some point in the afternoon, I started thinking about my mom, about how she would never have let this happen, about how she always made sure my birthdays were special no matter what else was going on. And honestly, I broke down. I cried for the first time in months, like really cried, and I couldn't stop for a good while. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch with swollen eyes and a wet face, and I remember thinking before falling asleep that this had officially been the worst birthday of my life. Sunday morning, I was woken up by the doorbell. It was like 9 a.m., and my dad and Hunter weren't coming back until the afternoon, so I had no idea who it could be. I dragged myself to the door, still half asleep, and when I opened it, there was my grandfather Eugene sitting in his wheelchair with his permanent nurse, a woman like 50 years old named Patricia. My grandfather was paralyzed from the waist down from a car accident like 10 years ago, but that never stopped him from being an incredibly active and present person in my life, especially after my mom died. He lived in another state, like a 2-hour flight away, so we couldn't see each other as often as we would have liked, but we talked on the phone at least once a week. I stood there in shock, literally with my mouth open, and he just smiled and said something like, "Are you going to let me in or what?" I helped him in along with Patricia, and I asked him what he was doing there. I wasn't expecting him at all. He told me he'd flown in early that morning because he wanted to spend my birthday with me, that he'd tried to coordinate with my dad, but Victor had told him he'd be out of town and that I'd be fine alone. Eugene wasn't convinced that I'd be fine alone on my 18th birthday, so he decided to come anyway. It was at that moment when something inside me broke completely. And not in a bad way, but like when you can finally let out everything you've been holding in. I sat on the living room floor and told him everything. Absolutely everything. About the last 2 years since Mom died. About how my dad treated me versus how he treated Hunter. About the canceled birthday. About feeling invisible and unwanted in my own home. Eugene just listened without interrupting, with that serious expression he got when he was really angry but trying to stay calm. And when I finished talking, he just told me, "This isn't right, Adrian. This isn't even remotely right, and we're gonna fix this." My dad and Hunter got home like at 4 inches the afternoon, all tanned and in good spirits, talking about the fish they'd caught, and they froze when they saw Eugene in the living room. The tension was so thick you could literally feel it. You know, that awkward moment when you know something big is about to go down. Eugene, with that calm but firm voice he had, told my dad they needed to talk privately, and although my dad tried to say he was tired from the trip and they could talk later, Eugene basically insisted in a way that left no room for negotiation. They went into my dad's study and were in there for like an hour, and although I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, I could hear the tone of the conversation going up and down, occasional raised voices, and at one point, I heard my dad yell something I couldn't make out. When they came out, my dad looked like defeated, like someone had knocked all the air out of his lungs, and Eugene told me to pack my things, that I was going to go live with him. He said living near him was going to be better for me anyway, because it was closer to the university I was going to, and that he had plenty of space in his house, and Patricia was there to help with whatever I needed. I'm not going to lie. Part of me felt guilty, like was I abandoning my family? But another part of me, the bigger and more honest part, felt relieved. Like finally, someone was rescuing me from a situation that had become unsustainable. My dad didn't say anything during all this, just stood there staring at the floor, and Hunter was confused asking what was happening, but nobody explained to him at that moment. It took me like 3 hours to pack all my important stuff, clothes, books, my laptop, some mementos of my mom I'd kept. Eugene had booked tickets for a flight the next morning, so we spent that night at a hotel near the airport. That night, while we were eating Chinese takeout in the hotel room, Eugene asked me if I was sure about this decision, if it was really what I wanted, and I told him, yes, without any doubt. After dinner, I checked my phone and had a long message from my dad, like a whole essay, apologizing for everything, saying he'd been a bad father, that he had no excuse for how he'd treated me, that he hoped someday I could forgive him. It was weird, honestly, because I'd never seen or heard him so vulnerable, but I also couldn't help wondering if it was genuine or if Eugene had given him some kind of ultimatum in their private conversation. A few days after I moved in with Eugene, when we were more settled and things were calmer, he told me he needed to tell me something important about my mom and dad, something that explained a lot about the dynamic I'd lived with all these years. I sat on his living room couch, preparing myself for whatever he was going to tell me, and honestly, nothing would have prepared me for what I heard. Eugene told me that my mom, before I was born, had an affair with another man, a relationship that lasted like 6 months. My dad eventually found out. There was the whole marital crisis, but they decided to try to work things out. The problem was that when my mom got pregnant with me, my dad wasn't sure if I was his son or the other guy's. According to Eugene, my dad had me take paternity tests multiple times during the first years of my life, all confirming that I was his biological son, but apparently he could never completely get over the distrust and resentment from that situation. My mom had confessed all this to Eugene years later, asking him to never tell me unless it was absolutely necessary. But Eugene felt that now I deserved to know the truth about why my dad had been so cold to me all my life. Processing that information was, I don't know, surreal isn't even the right word. On one hand, I got angry at my mom for having that affair that caused so many problems. But on the other hand, she wasn't here anymore to give me her version of the story or to explain the context of what was happening in her marriage at that time. I also got angry at my dad, maybe even more so, because at the end of the day the tests had confirmed I was his son, and yet he chose to punish me for something that happened before I was born. Something I had absolutely no control over. It was unfair, period. No matter how you looked at it. Eugene told me he understood if I needed time to process all this, and that he was there if I wanted to talk more about it. But honestly, I didn't know what to say or think at that moment. Like a week after that conversation, Eugene told me something else. Something that definitely added another weird layer to this whole situation. He told me he'd recently changed his will, and that the portion of his inheritance that was originally going to go to my dad, Victor, was now going to come directly to me. Eugene had quite a bit of money. He'd owned a successful construction business before his accident, and although he'd sold the business, the investments he'd made over the years meant he had considerable wealth. The reason he was telling me this, according to him, was so I'd know I'd be okay financially, no matter what happened, that I could finish college without worries and have a good start in life. He also admitted that part of the reason he changed the will was to send my dad a message about the consequences of his actions, that he couldn't treat his son that way and expect to have no repercussions. This made me reconsider the apology message my dad had sent me. Had it been genuine, or had it been because somehow he'd found out about the change in Eugene's will and was trying to repair our relationship for financial reasons? I had no way of knowing for sure, but the doubt was there, poisoning any possibility of me considering responding to his message. I decided that, at least for now, I wasn't going to respond at all. I needed space. I needed time to understand my own feelings about all this without the pressure of having to forgive or reconcile with someone who had hurt me so much, intentionally or not. Months passed. I started college in the fall, and things went surprisingly well. I was living on campus but visited Eugene every other weekend, and he came to some of my college events when he could. My grades were good. I'd made some close friends, joined the robotics club, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building a life that was truly mine. My dad tried to contact me a few more times during those first months. Occasional text messages asking how I was, how school was going, saying he missed me, but I never responded. Hunter also sent me a message once, like casually saying, "Hey, what's up?" But I didn't respond to that either. I wasn't ready for that conversation. I wasn't ready to explain why I'd left, or to hear their justifications or whatever they wanted to say. 4 months without contact became 6, then a year, and eventually almost 4 full years. During all that time, Eugene was my constant, my support, my real family. Patricia also became like a mother figure in a way, always making sure I ate well when I visited, giving me advice about life, that kind of thing. I finished my engineering degree with honors, got an amazing internship in my 3rd year that turned into a full-time job offer for after graduation, and basically built a whole successful life without any input or presence from my dad or Hunter. Like 2 weeks ago, while I was in the university library finishing my senior year final project, I got an email from my dad. It was the first time he'd tried to contact me in over a year, and the email was basically a congratulations because somehow he'd found out I was about to graduate. It said things like, "I'm so proud of you," and "I know I have no right to say this after everything that happened, but I want you to know I've always wanted the best for you," and ended with, "I'd love to be there at your graduation if you'd let me." I read it like 3 times, trying to feel something, anything. But honestly, I just felt a kind of indifference. I wasn't angry like I would have been 4 years ago, but I wasn't excited or moved either. It was more like reading an email from a stranger who happened to know my name and some facts about my life. I haven't responded to that email, and I probably won't. My graduation ceremony is in 2 weeks, and Eugene is going to be there in the front row with Patricia, and that's all I need. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh, if I should give my dad a chance to explain himself or try to rebuild something. But then I remember that 18th birthday. I remember all the years of feeling invisible and unwanted, and I realize that some things are just too broken to fix. Or maybe someday I'll change my mind. I don't know. But for now, I'm okay with how things are. I'm okay being just Adrian, living his life without that toxicity in it. And I guess that's enough.